The Unsung Melody, Chapter 1. The Weight of Silence, Memphis, Tennessee, 1998. The air hung thick with the humid promise of summer. But for 14-year-old Olivia Hayes, every breath felt heavy. Her home was a landscape of whispered arguments, clinking bottles, and the hollow echo of her mother's increasingly frequent absences. Her father, a ghost in his own house, had long since retreated into silence, leaving Olivia to navigate the shifting sands of her childhood alone. Her solace was a battered upright piano in the corner of the living room, its keys chipped, its voice slightly out of tune. There, amidst the discordant reality, she found harmony. Olivia was a prodigy, a quiet force of nature at the keyboard. Her fingers, nimble and precise, could coax emotions from the most complex scores. But beneath the music, beneath the quiet intensity, lay a fragile core. The bruises, carefully hidden beneath long sleeves, were easier to conceal than the ache in her heart. She was a solitary child, guarded, always on the periphery. Her music teacher, Ms. Evelyn Reed, saw beyond the quiet exterior. Ms. Reed was a woman of formidable presence, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. A former opera singer, her voice, though no longer soaring, still carried the resonant depth of a life lived passionately. She taught music theory and piano with a blend of strict discipline and profound empathy. She saw the talent in Olivia, yes, but more importantly, she saw the fear. She noticed the way Olivia flinched at sudden movements, the way her gaze darted to the door during class, as if expecting something terrible to break through the ordinary. One sweltering afternoon in late May, a few weeks before school let out for summer, Olivia arrived at her lesson with a fresh bruise blooming beneath her eye, barely masked by cheap concealer. Her usual quiet composure was replaced by a simmering desperation. She stumbled through a Chopin nocturne, her fingers faltering, the music losing its soul. Ms. Reed stopped her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Olivia," she said, her voice softer than usual, "are you all right?" Olivia shook her head, tears welling up, unbidden, unstoppable. "I can't do this anymore, Ms. Reed," she whispered, the words ragged. I can't." Ms. Reed's eyes, usually so sharp, softened further. She didn't press for details, didn't demand explanations. Instead, she did something unexpected. She pulled Olivia into a hug, a warm, enveloping embrace that smelled faintly of lavender and old sheet music. It was the first truly comforting touch Olivia had felt in years. "Olivia," Ms. Reed said, her voice a low, steady murmur, "you are stronger than you know. Your music, it's a gift. It's your voice, even when you can't speak. Never forget that." That night, something broke inside Olivia. The silence at home felt unbearable, the weight of everything too much. She packed a small backpack, a handful of clothes, a few cherished books, and a worn photograph of her grandmother. She was 14, terrified and utterly alone. Her plan was vague, desperate. Run away, disappear, escape the suffocating reality of her life. As she crept towards the back door, the phone rang. It was late, past midnight. Who could be calling? She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. Her mother, usually oblivious in her stupor, stirred from the couch. "Olivia? Who is that?" she slurred. Olivia froze. Then, a whispered word. "It's Ms. Reed." It was. Ms. Reed's voice was calm, yet urgent. "Olivia, are you there?" "Yes," Olivia whispered, clutching the phone. "Don't move," Ms. Reed said. "I'm coming to get you. Just stay where you are." A few minutes later, Ms. Reed's old sedan pulled up to the curb. Eleanor didn't know how her teacher knew. She never asked. Maybe a call to the police about a missed attendance, a concern, something Ms. Reed had seen in her eyes that day. Whatever it was, Ms. Reed was there. She didn't question, didn't lecture. She simply helped Olivia into the car, driving her to a small, unassuming house where a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes met them at the door. Miss Reed had arranged for Olivia to stay with a distant relative, a retired teacher, in a quiet neighborhood across town. It wasn't a formal adoption, but a lifeline, a temporary sanctuary that turned into a permanent one. Olivia would eventually thrive there, going on to study music at a prestigious conservatory, eventually becoming the celebrated pianist and composer she was today. That night, Miss Reed had not just saved her from a terrible home, she had saved her from herself, from a desperate act that could have derailed her entire life. Chapter 2: The Echo of a Debt. 25 years later, in 2023, Olivia Hayes sat at a grand piano in a sold-out concert hall in New York City. The final notes of her latest composition, Symphony of Whispers, fading into thunderous applause. Her life was a vibrant tapestry of travel, performance, and creative fulfillment. The quiet, bruised girl from Memphis was a distant memory, replaced by a confident, acclaimed artist. Yet amidst the triumph, a shadow lingered, a profound, aching sense of gratitude, intertwined with a nagging guilt. She had never seen Miss Evelyn Reed again after that night. The Kaya-faced relative had explained that Miss Reed felt it was best for Olivia to have a clean break, a fresh start, without constant reminders of her past. Olivia had honored that, focusing on her studies, pouring her soul into music. But the debt, the profound debt of a life saved, remained. As the years passed, the desire to find Miss Reed grew into an imperative. Olivia felt an increasing urgency to thank her, to tell her how her intervention had shaped every single note she played, every success she achieved. It wasn't just about gratitude. It was about closure. It was about acknowledging the quiet heroism of a woman who had, without fanfare, reached into the darkness and pulled her out. After the concert, Olivia flew back to her spacious loft in downtown Memphis. She loved the city, had chosen to return here after her studies, finding inspiration in its rhythm and history. But now, it was a backdrop for a different kind of pursuit. Her first step was to contact her old elementary school. The principal, a kindly woman who vaguely remembered Miss Reed, informed Olivia that Miss Reed had retired many years ago and her records were archived. They couldn't give out personal information. Olivia felt a familiar pang of frustration. The world, so connected in some ways, could be stubbornly opaque in others. She reached out to old friends, former classmates. Most remembered Miss Reed, but none knew where she had gone. Her best friend, Sarah, a vibrant, no-nonsense interior designer, listened patiently over coffee. "Olivia, honey, I get it. She saved you. But people move on, they change. She might not even want to be found." "I have to try, Sarah," Olivia insisted, her voice tight with emotion. "I owe her. My entire life, everything I am, is because of her. What if she's struggling? What if she needs something? I can't just forget her." Sarah sighed, but her eyes held understanding. "Okay, so where do we start?" "I thought about Mark," Olivia said, referring to Mark Jensen, a quiet, bookish boy from their class who had become the school librarian. He always knew everything. He was always in the archives, even back then. Chapter 3: Echoes in the Archives. The old elementary school hadn't changed much. The smell of dust and floor wax still hung in the air, oddly comforting. Mark Jensen, now a man in his early 40s with thinning hair and gentle eyes, looked up from a stack of books as Olivia entered the library. "Olivia Hayes?" he asked, a faint smile touching his lips. "The Olivia Hayes? Wow, long time no see." "Mark," Olivia smiled, genuinely pleased. "You haven't changed a bit." They talked for a while, catching up on the intervening years. Mark listened with quiet awe as Olivia spoke of her concerts, her compositions. Then, Olivia explained her mission. "I'm trying to find Miss Evelyn Reed," she said, her voice softening. She helped me a lot back then, more than anyone knows." Mark's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful frown. "Miss Reed, she was a force, wasn't she? Taught me how to appreciate a good alto, even though I mostly just read about history." He tapped his chin. "I remember when she left. It was pretty sudden. I think she had some family issues, or a health thing. She didn't talk about it much." "Do you think there's anything in the school archives?" Olivia asked, hope flickering. "Old faculty records? Anything?" Mark's eyes lit up. Maybe. There's a box of old personnel files in the dusty basement storage. Long shot, but worth a look." They spent the next few hours sifting through forgotten files, decades of yellowed paper, old lesson plans, forgotten faculty memos. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and dust, a tangible connection to a past that felt both distant and incredibly present. Olivia felt a surge of nostalgia for the school, for the small classroom where Ms. Reed had unlocked the magic of music for her. Finally, tucked away in a brittle manila folder labeled Reed E., Mark found it, a single undated memo stamped with the school's old seal. It was a request for a change of address, a forwarding address sent to the school board after her retirement. The address was for a facility. Harmony House Assisted Living, Mark read aloud, squinting at the faded print. Memphis. Looks like she stayed in town, after all. Olivia's heart leaped. Harmony House. A retirement home. The name sounded pleasant, peaceful, a place where her hero might be spending her golden years. Perhaps still humming old opera tunes, surrounded by comfort. "Mark," Olivia said, her voice filled with a profound gratitude. "You have no idea what this means to me. Thank you. Thank you so much." Chapter 4, A Different Kind of Harmony. The next morning, Olivia drove to Harmony House, a modern, cheerful building nestled amidst manicured lawns and blooming azaleas. It wasn't the somber, institutional place she had vaguely imagined. It felt bright, welcoming. At the reception desk, a kind-faced nurse, Nurse Jenkins, greeted her. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm here to see Evelyn Reed," Olivia said, a tremor in her voice. "Ms. Evelyn Reed." Nurse Jenkins smiled warmly. "Ah, Evelyn. She's a dear. She's in the common room, usually listening to the radio or looking out the window." Olivia's heart soared. Evelyn was here. She was well enough to be in the common room. This was it, the reunion she had dreamt of for years. She followed Nurse Jenkins down a brightly lit corridor. The common room was filled with soft chatter, the gentle strains of classical music, and the rustle of newspapers. Several residents sat in comfortable armchairs, some dozing, others quietly engaged in activities. Nurse Jenkins pointed. "There she is." Olivia's gaze followed, and then her world tilted. Sitting by a large window, staring out at the garden with a vacant expression, was an elderly woman. Her silver hair was thin, disheveled. Her once piercing eyes were clouded, unfocused. Her hands, once so strong and expressive at the piano, lay inert in her lap, tremoring slightly. She was tiny, shrunken, a mere shadow of the formidable woman Olivia remembered. This couldn't be Ms. Reed. Not her vibrant, intelligent, commanding Ms. Reed. "Evelyn," Nurse Jenkins said gently, approaching the woman. "You have a visitor. This is Olivia." The woman, Evelyn, slowly turned her head. Her eyes met Olivia's, but there was no recognition, no spark of the old intelligence, just a blank, almost childlike gaze. "Hello, dear," Evelyn murmured, her voice raspy, unfamiliar. Are you here for the tea?" Olivia felt a wave of profound disappointment, quickly followed by a crushing sadness. This was not the reunion she had envisioned. This was a confrontation with the brutal reality of time and illness. Her hero, her savior, was lost in the labyrinth of her own mind. "She has advanced dementia, I'm afraid," Nurse Jenkins whispered to Olivia, her voice filled with a gentle pity. "Some days are better than others, but she rarely knows where she is or who anyone is. She mostly lives in her own world now." Olivia sank into a chair beside Evelyn, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She had envisioned a moment of profound recognition, a heartfelt embrace, words of gratitude flowing freely. Instead, she was met with a blank stare, an empty shell of the woman who had once been her anchor. The unsung melody of her gratitude had nowhere to land. She stayed for an hour, just sitting, watching Evelyn, trying to reconcile the woman before her with the vivid memory of her teacher. She spoke softly, telling Evelyn about her life, about the music, about the success she had found. Evelyn occasionally nodded or mumbled something incoherent, her gaze drifting. Olivia felt a profound ache in her chest. She had found her, but she had lost her all over again. Chapter 5. A different kind of resonance. Olivia left Harmony House that day with a heavy heart. Her initial elation replaced by a profound sense of grief. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. To finally find the person who had saved her, only to discover she was no longer truly there. She called Sarah, her voice thick with unshed tears. She's not there, Sarah. Not really. It's devastating." Sarah listened, offering quiet comfort. "I'm so sorry, Liv. It's hard seeing people you love change so much." But even amidst the devastation, a tiny seed of an idea began to sprout in Olivia's mind. During her visit, she had noticed something. When a soft classical piece played on the common room's radio, Evelyn's eyes had seemed to momentarily flicker, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch of her fingers. "Nurse Jenkins," Olivia asked the next day, back at Harmony House, "does Evelyn ever respond to music?" Nurse Jenkins nodded. "Sometimes, it's one of the few things that seems to cut through the fog for a moment. She used to sing, opera. She had a beautiful voice, from what I hear. Sometimes, if we play a very familiar opera aria, she'll hum along, or her eyes will light up." Olivia's mind raced. Of course, Miss Reed, the opera singer, the music teacher. Music was her language. If anything could reach her, it would be that. "Do you have a piano here?" Olivia asked, her voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Nurse Jenkins smiled. "Yes, we do. In the main hall. It's not a concert grand, but it's decent." The next day, Olivia arrived at Harmony House. not with empty hands, but with a stack of old sheet music. Her own compositions, yes, but also the classical pieces Ms. Reed had taught her. The familiar exercises, even some of the simpler opera arias. She sat at the piano in the main hall, its keys slightly yellowed, its tone a little bright. Evelyn was in her usual armchair, dozing. Olivia took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. She started with a simple Bach prelude, a piece Ms. Reed had insisted all her students master. The notes flowed, familiar and comforting. Other residents gathered, drawn by the music. But Olivia's gaze was fixed on Evelyn. At first, there was no reaction. Then, as Olivia moved into a more complex, expressive Chopin waltz, a piece Evelyn had particularly loved, something shifted. Evelyn's head tilted slightly. Her eyes, still unfocused, seemed to track the sound. A faint smile, almost imperceptible, touched her lips. Olivia continued, playing a medley of familiar classical pieces. She played with a newfound passion, pouring all her love, all her gratitude, all her yearning into each note. This wasn't a concert for an audience. It was a conversation, a desperate attempt to bridge the unbridgeable. After an hour, Olivia moved to a familiar children's melody, one Miss Reed had used to teach them scales. As the simple tune filled the hall, Evelyn's lips moved, a faint warbling sound. She was humming, not perfectly, but undeniably. Nurse Jenkins, watching from the doorway, had tears in her eyes. She gave Olivia a thumbs up. A different kind of harmony was indeed forming. Chapter 6. The Unsung Melody. Over the next few weeks, Olivia made Harmony House a regular stop. She came 3 times a week, sometimes more, bringing her music, her patience, and her unwavering hope. She didn't expect a full recovery or even a complete conversation. She simply wanted to connect, to offer a moment of clarity, a sliver of peace. To the woman who had given her so much, she started playing her own compositions, pieces inspired by the very lessons Miss Reed had taught her. She watched Evelyn carefully, noticing the subtle shifts in her expression, the way her breathing would deepen, the way her fingers would twitch, as if remembering the feel of piano keys beneath them. One afternoon, Olivia sat down at the piano, feeling a profound sense of purpose. She had spent the last few nights composing a new piece, a melody that encapsulated her journey, her gratitude, her unsung debt to Miss Reed. She called it simply the Unsung Melody. The piece began with quiet, searching chords, reminiscent of her lost childhood. It built in intensity, reflecting her struggles and her eventual triumph, guided by an invisible hand. It had a lyrical, soaring quality, full of both yearning and profound peace. As her fingers danced across the keys, she poured her heart into every note, imagining Miss Reed's stern but kind face, her resonant voice. As the music swelled, a profound quiet descended upon the common room. Even the usually restless residents seemed mesmerized. Olivia kept her gaze on Evelyn. Evelyn, who had been staring blankly at the wall, slowly, incrementally turned her head. Her eyes, usually clouded, seemed to clear, just for a moment. A flicker of recognition, a spark. Olivia continued to play, her eyes fixed on her teacher. The melody soared, reached its emotional crescendo, then gently resolved into a poignant, hopeful chord. When the last note faded, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, from Evelyn's lips, a single clear word, spoken with astounding clarity. "Olivia?" It was a question, a statement, a profound recognition, a name spoken as it had been 25 years ago. Olivia gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Reed?" she whispered back, barely able to speak. Evelyn's gaze, though still fragile, held a surprising depth. She reached out a trembling hand, beckoning. Olivia rushed to her, kneeling by her chair, clutching Evelyn's frail hand in hers. You made it, didn't you?" Evelyn murmured, her voice weak, but undeniably Miss Reed's. "You played beautifully. That music, it's you, isn't it?" "Yes, Miss Reed," Olivia choked out, tears blurring her vision. "It's me. It's all because of you. You saved me. That night, you saved my life." Evelyn's eyes, bright for a moment, held a hint of a familiar knowing smile. "I knew you would fly, Olivia. I always knew." Her hand tightened on Olivia's. "The music, it's your voice. Don't ever stop." And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the clarity faded. Evelyn's gaze became distant again, her hand relaxing in Olivia's. She looked around the room, confused. Are we having tea?" she asked, her voice thin and reedy once more. Olivia stayed there, holding Evelyn's hand, a profound, bittersweet joy filling her heart. It was a fleeting moment, a precious glimpse behind the veil of dementia, but it was enough. It was everything. Chapter 7. The Lingering Melody. From that day forward, those moments of clarity, though rare and brief, became Olivia's most cherished treasures. Sometimes, during a particular piece, Evelyn would utter a coherent sentence, recall a specific lesson, or even hum a perfect note from an old aria. These were tiny victories, hard-won battles against the encroaching fog, illuminated by the power of music. Olivia understood now that her purpose in finding Miss Evelyn Reed wasn't to get a grand thank you or to see her old teacher fully restored. It was to give back, to offer comfort and connection, to ensure that the woman who had brought so much light into her life could experience moments of peace and recognition. She began to play for all the residents of Harmony House, transforming the common room into a small concert hall several times a week. Her music filled the lives of the elderly, bringing back forgotten memories, sparking joy, and offering a gentle comfort. Nurse Jenkins and the other staff were immensely grateful, witnessing the profound impact Olivia's presence had on the residents, especially on Evelyn. Olivia's professional life continued to flourish, but her work at Harmony House became an essential part of her identity. She discovered a new depth to her artistry, a new purpose beyond the stage. Her music, once a personal refuge, now became a bridge, connecting the lost, comforting the forgotten, bringing moments of clarity and joy to those whose memories had faded. She knew Evelyn would likely never fully return to her, but she had seen her. She had heard her voice, full of recognition, full of the wisdom she remembered, and Miss Reed, in her fleeting moments of clarity, now had someone who understood, someone who remembered her not just as the woman in the armchair, but as the formidable, kind, life-changing teacher she once was. One quiet afternoon, Olivia sat by Evelyn's side, not playing the piano, but simply holding her hand. Evelyn was dozing, a faint smile on her lips. Olivia looked at her, at the lines etched by time, at the gentle rise and fall of her chest. She had found her hero, and in doing so, she had found a deeper understanding of herself. The unsung melody of her gratitude had finally found its voice, not in a grand performance, but in the quiet, enduring harmony of presence and love. The music flowed, an endless, gentle river. It was the rhythm of a life saved, a debt repaid, a love that transcended memory itself. It was the song of Evelyn Reed, still resonating, still saving lives, long after her conscious mind had faded. And Olivia, her devoted student, was now her most profound echo.